How's it going, man?
Good. How are you?
Very good. Thank you so much for being here, especially, in this really like crazy time with what's happening in America.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here and being here. Where the hell are you?
I'm in South Africa, sunny South
Oh,
Africa. Yeah.
cool. How's it going? How's it over there?
It's pretty crazy. So we've just come out of this lockdown period. So
Hmm.
it's actually crazy to kind of just see what was happening in New York and happening in South Africa at the same time. We had the military like in the streets over here. So they were actually like patrolling around the streets to make sure that nobody's outside. We were only actually allowed to go out and get necessities. People were getting arrested. Like it was pretty crazy. So we've been in this lockdown period now since March. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so have we. I mean, I'm in Brooklyn, so it's been since early March. Yeah.
So you've literally been in like the hub of it, which is really crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I live in South Brooklyn. I live in Midwood. I actually live near one of the most famous funerals that had to be broken up. When
Oh
people
wow.
like at the height of New York's outbreak, which was much like when it was really like something like up to 10,000 new cases a day. And people were just insisting on like funeral after funeral. And one of them was within like visual distance of my house.
That's insane. That's proper
Yeah,
crazy.
it is actually. It is insane.
It's pretty crazy. I
Yeah.
just wanted to start off just by saying that a huge congratulations on the film. I'm so excited to see it.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a weird time to be, even I haven't talked about the movie in like several days. I haven't like thought about it. And it's like it feels weird to even like acknowledge it right now because of how much is going on. It's just very weird timing. But of course, I mean that's all that's already was already in motion before everything happened. So I mean, I thank you. But yeah, it's honestly even weird even like talking about it right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. Just kind of taking it back a little bit, that the film's being released now on like video on demand. So what is the kind of
Yes.
implications? Do you think it's going to be, it's not going to maybe have the same effect with regards not to being released like in theaters?
I mean, I really have no idea because things change so quickly. But I mean, we all assumed that there was really no way the movie could make as much money on demand as in theaters. That's just sort of something you accept in the environment we have. And because the alternative is to just say, not release any movies at all for a year or however long it is before we can safely have movie theaters. Because don't forget, movie theaters are basically the last safe thing that can come back, and they're like the least, and like as much as it's like my job, it's still one of the least necessary things. We all want the economy to come back, but there are just certain activities that we have to acknowledge are not important enough for people to die for. So we really wanted people to be able to see the movie without ever being able to have to put ourselves in a position of being responsible if someone got sick because they wanted to see something we did. And we also didn't want to wait. We just felt like, people are stuck at home, even if they're not, even if things are reopening, they're still not able to go to concerts and movies like they want to. They can maybe go to a restaurant, they can maybe start going to the store, but entertainment is, not, there's no like major comedy shows yet or anything. So uh, we just felt it was more important to just be able to put the movie out for people to have something to watch, and then then how much money we could make off it, because that world isn't going to come back just because we want it to either. It'll eventually come back, and I'm sure like the big blockbusters are going to wait. They're going to wait until they feel it's safe to be in theaters. But you know we didn't want to have a whole summer of just nothing. We figured, let's put it out, let's give something people to watch. It's not, Superman. It's not the kind of movie where like it has to be in a giant theater. It's a plot driven movie. It's a story driven movie. So we hope that, we just hope people enjoy it. Hope it passes some time and makes people a little bit happier and with everything that's going on.
Absolutely. So kind of also just going a little bit back from that, was being a comedian always kind of on the cards for you?
I was I started doing stand up in high school, mostly because almost everyone who feels the need to do comedy does it because of some problem. Usually it's about people who have either a desperate need for more attention than they should have, or were deprived of the attention a normal person should get. Either way, it has to do with people who desperately need to make strangers validate them. So as someone who didn't really have any friends, like in high school, it it was very alluring to be able to be in front of strangers and get their approval by laughing and get like that kind of mainlined happiness that only comedians need that badly. So it was just, I felt like I could do it. And so in high school, I started doing open mics, and the fact that they were going well and that I looked so ridiculously young, just, it gave me something I didn't have, which was like people liking me. And comics just sort of learned to chase that.
At what point were you kind of like, I have a knack for this and I'm going to continue doing this and make like a career out of this?
Well, I mean, the first time I did stand up, I was 17 and I had started writing jokes, and I just felt like these are good enough to be in front of an audience. And I felt like if I did this in front of people who don't know me, and like that it's a completely blank slate, an objective situation, I can show that I'm good enough to do this. And I did, and it worked. I just felt like I had like a lot of weird ideas that felt unique to me, and I wanted to use them.
You know, right from the start, did you feel like it was very difficult to kind of be honest on stage?
No, I didn't think that, because if anything, I had a problem with not holding things back. I was a person who had trouble censoring myself. And I always felt like, people are overly sensitive about what they are willing to admit about themselves. I feel like I overshared, if anything. I had a problem being overly honest with people. It hurt relationships with many people in my life. So yeah, I mean, I think that like truth is very important in comedy, because anytime you see comedians who they're working under a false premise because of whatever reason, whatever hangups they have, it doesn't work. It doesn't translate to being funny if you have to lie, if you have to put up a false pretense, because you can't be a truth teller if you're committed to something that's false, which I think right now is something that we see a lot of. We see a sort of epidemic of people who portray themselves as quote unquote truth sayers who can't stop lying.
Absolutely. You know, I find that we're in such a weird time right now with comedy. Like the landscape is completely changing, with all the Zoom comedy shows and everything like that. And I feel like, we don't necessarily have that opportunity to be as honest on stage, because you go to the Comedy Cellar and you have to put your phone in a bag and you have to like zip it up, and so nobody could like film you and kind of like mix up what you might say. Do you think that with the way things are going, do you think that comedy might change in that manner, where people have to be a little bit less honest and a little bit more filtered?
Well, it really depends on what you believe, and if the things you believe you think are unacceptable in society. And if that's, I mean, it's hard for me to answer that question, because I don't think my opinions are the kind that get you canceled. Like,
Yes.
I'm not someone saying, I have never had an opinion like politically that I felt like, oh, I can't say this or everyone's going to hate me. I mean, there's little things that, you disagree with people on, but I think that like, when I hear people say, I can't say this, I always start wondering, well, what is it you were trying to say that you're so worried about? Because there's nuanced things. I think that there's a big problem in that a lot of people feel the need to be dishonest about details because they want to uncomplicate their beliefs. So like, people have trouble accepting that one thing can be true if it makes what they want to do more complicated. And we don't have to get too into that, but the idea that you can have conflicting ideas. You can say, well, yes, I believe this, even though this, so it's complicated. It seems like people don't want things to be complicated. They want to be able to say, what I do is right monolithically, and anything that pushes against that must be wrong, when really the world is much more complex than that. So I think that like, I think not letting people record comedy shows is a good idea, because you don't have a right to say, no, you're not going to release a special, I'm going to release your special. I'm going to release a joke that you wrote that was never intended to be for public consumption, and to take away this ability for comics to work out their material, I think I absolutely think is wrong. I think you do not have a right to someone else's intellectual property. You do not have a right to tweet someone else's jokes as if, you know, you own them now. So yeah, I have no problem with that at all. And honestly, it's not even because they're getting canceled. It's because they're stealing their property. This is the only income these people have, is their original jokes. And if you're putting them on page 6, you're taking away their ability to sell them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and, you know, if you kind of just look at what's going on right now, like, you know, this Jimmy Fallon controversy that just came out.
The what?
You know, the Jimmy Fallon controversy?
The blackface thing. Yeah, about when he was Chris Rock. I was just, when I saw that, I mean, I was just upset. I was like, I can't believe it took us 20 years to find out that this SNL sketch happened.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I think it's just funny because it's like, we all knew it was there. Like, I don't know anyone who didn't know it was there. It just seems weird when people act as though it was revealed. It's like, it wasn't revealed. We all knew. We just weren't upset about it until now. Not that there's, and look, we should be educating people about blackface, because a lot of people of the last several decades were ignorant about the meaning of it. And at the same time, there's also a difference between portraying a character earnestly and mocking black people. There's a reason why I have never met personally, obviously I'm not saying I'm speaking for anyone, just personally, my black friends, I have never met one black person when speaking about the subject who had a problem with Robert Downey Jr. in Tropic Thunder.
Absolutely. That was actually just what I was about to bring up.
Because
right now.
Because you have to be able to portray something to tell the story of it. I mean, would every white actor in Bamboozled be racist? Or are we saying there has to be some room to portray and teach people, hey, this is what blackface is, and this is why it's wrong. And that's what that movie actually did. I agree. We don't need white actors to play black characters in makeup. But it's okay to talk about it and acknowledge that there's differences between singing with the purpose of there's a giant difference between saying, I am trying to mock black people with this performance, or I'm actually trying to do something specific and educational. It is not the same. What Robert Downey Jr. portraying a white actor in blackface is not the same thing as Chris Rock being portrayed by Jimmy Fallon is not the same thing as putting on shoe polish and singing. They're 3 completely different categories. Absolutely. And it's okay to have nuance. And it's not as though Jimmy Fallon is out there saying, I'm going to keep being blackface. No, it's saying that things change and attitudes change and words change. And it's okay to acknowledge that something is not okay anymore. But you also have to acknowledge what year this happened and say, well, this was a time when this was considered okay, and we are saying that is not the case anymore, and that we made a mistake in doing this. And that's okay. It's okay to have that conversation. I've never been in blackface, so I'm very comfortable talking about this.
Yeah. You know,
I was a Smurf once. I wasn't blue.
That's brilliant.
Now, granted, if you desaturate the photo, it might look bad. But in my defense, I was Smurfette. I was also in drag.
So that could be a problem down the line.
Well, I luckily had a blonde wig, so it really confuses the issue. It makes it much harder to argue that.
Watching Jimmy Fallon's whole apology today, you know, it's a very conflicted type of a situation where you know, I felt like it came almost at the perfect time and not so at the perfect time, because I feel like, you know, this is such a good time to actually talk about this topic and to educate people. But what do you think the intention behind releasing this now? Do you think it was to actually educate people, or do you think it was a thing to slander Jimmy Fallon?
I don't know, because I think that it's impossible to pretend that everyone calling people out, we don't know what their original intentions are, even if they are good. There are obviously trolls, and the problem is there's a lot of times you see people who are simply offended by progress trying to use it against itself. And there's a lot of people out there who are simply saying, well, I hate Black Lives Matter and Me Too, therefore I'm going to try to find people who agree with it and make disingenuous arguments that they're hypocrites. Because that happens too a lot. That happens to people who are just making disingenuous arguments, trying to twist movements into taking them someplace toxic. And it's important. That's why it's important to look at the complexity of any situation. I can't speak for what's in the heart of anyone who talked about this issue. All I can say is that, like I said, there's different degrees. There's different levels of what's wrong. And there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, let's make sure that it's no longer acceptable for white actors to wear black makeup. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to end the career of anyone who did it decades ago. It's okay to talk about it. And I do think there's more important things to talk about than what Jimmy Fallon wore in the 90s. But doesn't mean it's disingenuous to say, hey, here's something. You know, Daryl Hammond played Jesse Jackson in fairly light blackface. And I can tell you from having seen it, and just like with the Chris Rock bit, there was never a shred of stereotype behind that performance. And intention matters. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean you can't say, don't do this. But you should also acknowledge there's a difference between honestly trying to portray a specific person and trying to mock a race. One is much worse. And it's okay to have the nuance of saying, this is bad, but it's not as bad as this.
I completely agree with you. I couldn't agree more. Just to kind of shift it a little bit now, how do you actually get into your writing process? Like, what does it really entail? How do you get into that mindset of when you're about to write comedy?
I can't explain enough. I can't overemphasize enough how painful the process writing is. I don't know if that's for everyone. I just know that there is a certain level to which your body doesn't want to concentrate. It's very hard to make yourself because I almost have to get a manic state to write comedy well, and which in and of itself has hurt my career. So it's like you have to really force your mind to play. The only thing I could compare it to is if you've ever had depression, the feeling you get, or even if you haven't had depression, you've just been in depressed moments, which is different than having the disease. But if you've been depressed, you know that feeling of yanking yourself, of the idea that you can just force yourself to stop being sad and just think about something else, and how that's the ugliest, grossest feeling you can have emotionally, of pushing yourself out of being upset about something. That's what writing feels like. It feels like that much of wrenching something out of yourself. That's why comedy is so dark. It's a very painful moment.
Absolutely. How do you and Pete know each other?
Sorry, hold on one second. I have to.
No problem.
My mom.
Oh, good.
Pete and I met when he was right when he turned 18. We did a comedy show together, and then a few months later, we hung out. We had a very close mutual friend, and then a few months later, he was in LA where I lived. Didn't know anyone, and we met. We had the close mutual friend. I was like, oh, nice kid. I'll show him around. Let's check out some sneaker stores in LA. It was fun. We got along really well. We had fun, and we started writing together a little while after that when Comedy Central inquired about him doing a web series, which we wrote really quickly, and then they loved, and they said, oh, let's make this, which would have been made had he not gotten SNL.
Absolutely.
So then I ended up writing for SNL the following season, mostly because they were happy with how the Justin Bieber roast went.
Did you write for the Justin Bieber roast?
Yeah. I wrote about half the jokes, both of the Bieber and the Rob Lowe roast that you saw Pete do. He wrote about the other half, and then just a couple others were friends of ours, but pretty much half the jokes were mine at both of those. And I've written for the Baldwin roast, but I wrote for Triumph and Chris Redd.
In your opinion, what makes a good roast joke?
I mean, that's a tough question. I don't believe at all in the concept of like being mean as the main purpose. I think it's about just the mathematics of joke writing. It's just about having something that the audience agrees with after they hear it.
So
And
like,
it's like,
sorry,
no,
go
like
ahead.
it's no. I mean, I'm saying I don't really know how to explain it, but it's just about the math of joke writing, about not being lazy, about actually having something tangible that someone else would want to steal, like finding that, you know, that wordplay or that logical point that just makes a joke work.
So like, where does the deconstruction start for you? So like, what's your starting point when you actually start to write like a roast joke?
I think the way it usually goes is when you're looking at a subject, you kind of figure out first you figure out what there is to make fun of, what an audience will agree with you on, what's the angle to take this person on. And then you start using that to come back and figure out a joke about it. Or the other way is to just start making a list of every fact about this person. And then you basically say, the first half of the sentence is something true, and then just see where that can go. So it's like, Alec Baldwin has written 2 books. That's a fact. What can we do with that? You know, he's written, and that leads you to a joke like, Alec Baldwin's a great writer. He's written 2 books, a one-man show, and the word whore in his ex-wife's windshield. That's it. You just kind of see where it takes you.
Yeah, 100%. Were there some jokes that never actually made it to the roast that you wrote?
What's that?
Were there some jokes that never made it to the roast that you wrote?
Oh yeah. I mean, when you do the roast, and this happened at both the Bieber and Rob Lowe roast, funny enough, when Pete does the performance, it gets cut in half. So he's doing twice as many, every performer is doing twice as many jokes as make it to air. And oddly enough, I ended up both times writing exactly half the ones he did live and half the ones that made it to air. And on top of that, there's a bunch of jokes you can't do because other people say, oh, Rob Riggle already has a joke that's too close to this. You can't do it. You're like, you know, and also there's just jokes that you cut because you're like, all right, what's the best one? Like what we would do is we would have Pete go to the comedy clubs and run these jokes and just count where the laughs were. And then there's jokes that they cut just because they're probably too mean. Sometimes I think like we had a Robin Williams joke that we thought was great, but
you know, like kind of on that, is there any animosity like after the roast where like people will be like, oh,
yes.
you know, like that was fun, but like, you know, like fuck you, like that's sort of like a thing.
Oh yeah, Ludacris was really mad.
What happened? Like,
I don't know if I should be explaining that much. All I can say is that he didn't appreciate everything that was said about him at the Bieber roast. Didn't really. Here's the thing. That's the same thing happened with Ann Coulter, though. People come into these things sometimes never watching one and not really knowing what to expect, and then get upset that we did things that anyone who was a roast fan would be like, "You really thought we weren't gonna talk about you like that? Like that's the game." It's like, I know Ludacris got mad. I know Ann Coulter basically looked like she didn't even. Ann Coulter thought she was set up when actually she set herself up because she refused to use all the jokes that were offered of her. And she thought her and her friends could write better ones, which is what happened with The Situation. And that goes bad.
I know. I remember that. She bombed so badly. Actually,
And she could have done well. That audience was poised to give her a break because she was the villain there. All you had to do was have a few good jokes, and everyone would have loved it and would have appreciated her being a good sport, and she wasn't.
Yeah, 100%. Was she actually like a bad sport behind the scenes as well, or was it just like a respect sort of a thing behind the scenes?
I didn't really interact with Ann Coulter behind the scenes. I saw her there. I mean, I think she kind of treated it like it was just another stop on a book tour, like any other show. And it's like, you have to take this more seriously. This is a fight here. And people hated her, because she's Ann Coulter. So she had a responsibility to take this seriously. And she kind of thought she could just show up and just troll the audience and say things that might have appealed to her audience, which is just an audience that doesn't like comedy. They don't give a shit about it. So I think she just really miscalculated by not doing her research and not accepting the fact that her and her friends can't write jokes. That's not their job. You know,
Yeah,
and if people offer you good jokes, you should take them and be happy, because they would, if she had done the jokes they gave her, she would have done fine. And people would have said, "Oh, it's nice to see that she's a good sport." We all would have moved on. Instead, she had to paint herself like this giant victim and act
yeah,
like, you know, this was all designed for her. It's like, "Oh, it was the roast of Ann Coulter." And it's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that, number one, you are making this about yourself and saying that, like, even though everyone's getting made fun of, you're the only one who shouldn't have been made fun of. And also, it's your fault for not recognizing that you were the carrot top at this thing. Everyone knows who's who. There's a reason why Courtney Love is there. There's a reason why certain celebrities are there. They're there because they're punching bags, not because they're funny."
absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, like her whole thing was just, it was such a bomb. It was crazy. You know, actually, funny enough, Ann Coulter is my friend's neighbor in New York, and the mom of my friend and Ann Coulter are like very close friends. So the mom started making my friend call Ann Coulter Auntie Han, which is pretty strange.
Mm, like the pretzels.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, you know,
Uh,
look, she tried to make her career out of being kind of a roasty, like, political pundit. And I think people who are actually in the roast world kind of recognized that this was essentially a little girl in her mommy's shoes trying to put on the costume of a tough, you know, no nonsense, hilarious ball buster. And when she was put in the room with, you know, the elites of that, it fell apart.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, kind of like moving to the movie now, how did the whole movie idea come into fruition?
Well,
Or,
before Pete was on SNL, when me and Pete were doing that Comedy Central web series, it was right after Pete had done Trainwreck. So both Lauren and Judd were suddenly interested in Pete. And Judd came to us because Pete and I wrote a movie script that didn't really go anywhere, but, you know, we wrote our first, you know, kind of attempt at that. And Judd thought it was good. He was like, "Hey, let's write a new script together." And we started talking about that. And then Pete got SNL, which meant that could no longer happen. So that, along with the web series, that had to get canceled also. And then years later, we started talking about another script, a completely different script that was Judd's idea that we worked on, but due to various things, just, you know, scheduling and whatever one was doing, that didn't end up going anywhere. And so then Pete and I ended up writing our own script that we sold to Warner Brothers. That also, like, you know, with most movies, did not get made. But that script was another one that Judd read and thought that and said that he really liked it and thought that we improved a lot from last time he had read stuff with us, and said, "Hey, let's do this again." And this time was like, "All right, let's really start from scratch and start to really build a movie using everything at our disposal," which is really mining Pete's life and his pain and his experiences, and just trying to say, let's really build a good story off of this idea, not a biography, but just, you know, like 8 Mile or something, like just trying to tell a story that's emotionally realistic to what really happened.
you know, like Judd being an avid comedy fan, what was the decision to make Pete a tattoo artist in this as opposed to a comedian?
Well, if there was one thing we were 100% dead set on, it's not doing a movie about a comedian. That was never something we even remotely considered. When we wrote other scripts previously, we never let Pete's character be a comedian. And then even we would have rewrite people. That's the first thing they'd want to do, is make him a comic. And it's like, we're not doing another Big Sick. Like, we're not doing another, you know, movie that's been done. You know, like, you know, Big Sick's a good movie. I'm saying, like, why make another one of it? You know, why not try to do something else? And we just figured it's just so generic to do another movie where it's about a comedian and then we're just retelling someone's life. We were like, no, let's do something that actually has a fictional narrative here and try to see, like, who would this person be without the luck that he's had in his career.
You know
without
what?
having comedy, because
Absolutely.
he would kind of be a mess.
Absolutely. And kind of on that note, you know, Pete's a very complex guy, and you know, this is a semi-autobiographical film. Was it very difficult to get certain aspects kind of from him in terms of like drawing certain experiences?
Yeah, because this is a very complex kind of narrative, and it's a very uh, delicate situation because this still hurts him. Pete is, a troubled person. He has been very open about his illnesses and how they've affected his life and his family. And it's not like it's not past tense. He still feels everything that he's ever felt about this. So we were asking of him to really relive his most painful memories and the most pain that he's personally experienced to mine for this movie and to make this kind of uh, monument to his dad's sacrifice. So yeah, we were asking a lot, and just even this right now, the promotion of the movie before we sort of stopped promoting because of the seriousness of what's going on with George Floyd. But up until that point, it was a very, very difficult thing for him to talk about this, to have interviews about. Like he really is the raw nerve that you might think he is when it comes to talking about his father and and his mother and stuff like that. And not everyone understands it, but most people don't have BPD. Most people have not. They don't have the same chemistry that he has, and it's it's so quaint to see people that can still say things like rich people can't be mentally ill, or like the idea that the day he started getting an SNL salary that was going to change his brain that much. It'd be great if you could if success fixed that, but it doesn't. And he recognizes that like he's not trying to say that like he's the biggest victim in the world or that anyone should look at him and say, oh, that's what a real person who's been hurt looks like. No, this is just him trying to figure out how to live in the world with what he deals with, and that he's just been saddled with personally, and he just wants to do what's right. And like a lot of people, it's hard to know what that is.
So would you say that this was a very cathartic sort of an experience for him?
You know what? It was. And I know that Pete's real motivation is that this will help him move on because, he never wanted to be known as the guy with the dead dad. It really hurts him when people try to label him that way. But it's just when people would talk about him, that's what they would just go to. And, he did talk about it in his stand up because that's how he deals with it. That's how he's able to process and work through this kind of pain because that's how certain people are. They have to joke about things, they have to make ghoulish jokes in order to deal with something that painful. So it was cathartic, but it also straight up hurt. It also was like he had to force himself to think about the worst parts of his memory a lot. And that's basically every press interview he's going to do. He has to, because he's not someone who can just compartmentalize it. He's feeling it if he's talking about it. And that's why it's harder for him than I think people understand sometimes, because everyone just sort of looks at celebrities and decides they know what they're thinking and that their lives are so perfect. And it's like, yeah, he's got a lot of privileges, he's got a lot of benefits, and yet, you know, look at the last time he had to shut down his Instagram. It's not easy for him. It's he has to work hard to be okay. And that's what people with this kind of issue have to deal with.
Absolutely. And what was kind of the reception from the family?
I mean, I know his family very well. They're all very, very proud of this project, and they're very happy that Scott is being celebrated the way he is in this movie, Pete's father. Um, his mother, I know, she goes through so much. She's sacrificed so much for her kids, and she was she had that sort of period of time where she was like this, she was a 9/11 wife. And no one really knew what the proper way to treat these families were. We were trying to celebrate them, but in some ways, maybe that stunted them, or maybe that wasn't the best thing for their ability to move on. Who knows? But the family is very, very proud of him, especially knowing what he's gone through, that he's been able to pull it all together the way he has.
Absolutely. And like as a writer, how did you manage to kind of balance like the comedic and tragedy side of things?
Well, tragedy is a big part of comedy. So is tension. Pain is a big part of comedy. And I think that, for certain kinds of people, the kind of people who might like this movie, they understand that you have to, sometimes the most painful things are something you have to make jokes about, that you have to have a kind of gallows humor, because it's the only way to process it. So this was a movie that was about jokes not superseding the real emotions. It's definitely the most realistic movie Judd's ever done. That's what a lot of people, I think, the few people that have seen it have said, that I've noticed, that, we try to really not make this this isn't, and I, with all due respect, I love his movies. We're not making Rodney Dangerfield comedies here. Judd is trying to really expand what he's done, and it's a very ambitious movie. Like, it's not the movie I would have made on my own, because I wouldn't have been capable of something this deep and this sensitive. So, it's really an experimental kind of movie in that way. But I think it's important to remember that, tragedy helps comedy, because when you create the tension and you create the kind of seriousness of a situation, that's when you can start mining it also for these little moments too. You don't want it to be a joke engine. You want the jokes to be real, and to what's funny about it to be that we're really feeling like we're inside an accurate portrayal of someone's life.
Absolutely. And like you've known Pete for some time now. Through this movie, did you learn a little bit more about him, like things that you didn't know beforehand?
A little bit, but to be honest, I knew this. I don't think there was anything left on the table in terms of uh, his relationship with his family. But yeah, no, there are little things. Like, I did not know that when he was 8 years old on his football team, his coach made him stand up in front of the team and gave an improvised speech about 9/11. And how that happened a lot, where
Oh, wow.
a lot of people, took this child who was already, like, who was not doing great before his dad died. You know what I mean? Like, had issues to deal with, and then had him stand up and have some guy like just start, like I said, improvising a speech about heroes and Al Qaeda and all this stuff. And it's like, it's just a very weird thing for any little kid to be propped up like that, because then it becomes like, how many of these people are just trying to use this moment to show what, even though they mean well, you know what I mean? To kind of show everyone, look what a good person I am. Hey, come on, get on this pedestal. I'm going to show everybody how much respect I have. It's even though they meant well, it can really screw somebody up in weird ways. Kids have very delicate brains. So, I mean, I saw stuff like that. I got to see like old footage we found of him. And, I think, there's like some old footage of his dad I hadn't seen before. Because, like I said, because we're just diving into, let's just see what's going to be the most poignant way of hurting your feelings right now. It's sort of like how you have to write this. And Pete was very open to it. He wants to, for his mom, really, show some respect and kind of also be able to put it behind him and move on, which is something he's had trouble with.
Absolutely. If you don't mind me asking you, the whole thing of the Westboro Baptist Church, how did that whole thing come into fruition?
Well, I remember when the Westboro Baptist Church was at the San Diego Comic-Con. And this is sort of when they started becoming a very famous group, because it was sort of the height of the culture war surrounding gay marriage. It was right before gay marriage just became ubiquitous and the whole world just said, okay, yes, good, we're okay with this. And a lot of people hated the Westboro Baptist Church and feared them, which I thought that was the problem. Like, why do you fear these people? These are idiots. These are just the worst examples of just egotistical morons who think they should be listened to. And I saw, like, at Comic-Con, people would have their signs, and they would have, you know, mocking signs and costumes. And you would see the way Westboro just seemed to love it. Like, oh, look at this circus celebrating our being here. And I remember watching that thinking, I'll bet there is a better way of ruining their protest. And I thought, I bet, because I'd already done these Brickstone interviews where I would interview random people and just lie to them about news stories to get them to lie back. I would pretend that a news story existed that didn't, just to see if I could screw it, or I just make up a funny news story and pretend it was true. This is before Live Witness News. Before Jimmy Kimmel did Live Witness News, I was doing that exact bit. Because that is a fact. Because I was doing it in college even. So I just thought, like, why don't I just get a cameraman, put on a suit, make them think I'm a reporter, and then just make fun of them to their faces until they leave. And the whole point of it was, I was like, when you peacefully protest them and have a sign that makes fun of them, they love it. They think that just gives them more attention. But if you actually get in their face and make them feel stupid, they hate it. And I was like, I'm going to make you hate this. That was the whole point.
Did you get any like backlash from the actual church, like after those videos were released?
Well, I mean, they didn't like me, and they did, but I think they also didn't want to talk too much about it, because the more they did, the more attention they give me, and the bigger the videos would get, because my videos ended up being basically the most popular Westboro videos on YouTube almost. Like, if you looked up Westboro, my videos kept coming up, which was the whole point. You know, someone described me as a rodeo clown, and I thought that was the perfect way of saying it. You know, that there are people out there who are able to be emotionally hurt by what these people are doing. Doesn't hurt me, because I see them for who they are. But I can turn the scary, horrible people into entertainment for these people. And I was really honored that I could do that. And I got letters from kids. And it was like the formula was very specific. Gay kids in the Bible Belt would send me letters about how I made them feel less afraid of these ideas. And that, I never even expected that. That was the most amazing thing I could imagine. I also got letters from members of the church who left, that they said that, you know, to see me humiliating and making look foolish someone who they had so much fear, specifically Shirley Phelps, helped them. And I was really amazed and honored by that. I mean, it's uncomfortable talking about for me, because I'm not trying to be self-aggrandizing. I was a very small part of the people who fought against them, but it felt really, really good to know that, like, I found something that helped people. I found certain people were helped by figuring out a way of showing that, no, these are fucking idiots. Like, don't even acknowledge the idea that there's anything right about what they're doing. These are the dumbest people who have ever gotten media attention. That's how you should treat them. And watch this, because I'm gonna prove to you right now how much dumber than you thought they are.
It really is. It's so brilliant. It really is brilliant. Did you expect to get that?
I mean, I knew that they had egos. I knew that they were not as smart as they think they are. I knew that they thought they could win these arguments. And I knew that but I knew they were wrong, so they can't. And that was the whole idea. I went to it thinking, I bet I can just say a few jokes, get in these people's faces and annoy them. But I never imagined it would go as good as it did, because their egos made them want to argue. And they're arguing from a dishonest place. So I knew that I never expected it to be so vaudevillian in the way that I would just get them to just feed me these moments that I could use against them. It really was. And I never thought I was going to do it more than once. But then I saw, like, how big the first one got, and that people were asking me to, like, oh, they're going to be here. Can you go? Like, it became a thing where I would get these letters like, hey, they're coming to our town. Can you help us counter them? And it was just really a really beautiful kind of thing that, you know, I was being associated with.
It really is. It's an amazing project. You know, that first time that you went to go do it, did you expect them to not be like, so, I don't know, like, did you expect them to be like quite aggressive and like maybe try and fight you or anything along those lines?
Well, I hoped for that, but it never happened. They're very, very good at not getting physical. Believe me, I never wanted anything more than for them to take a swing at me because, I mean, none of them have ever exercised. It's not like they could actually do anything. I was always thinking, I mean, if these guys punched me, number one, I probably wouldn't feel it, and I would be the biggest thing on CNN for the day. So there was always like, I would have loved if I could have got one of these to throw a punch at me. But we never got there. They're very disciplined in that way, actually. One time somebody spit on someone and he was immediately kicked out.
Wow, that's incredible. When it comes to Triumph, the insult dog, what would you say is your favorite moment with regards to writing all that?
I mean, that's tough. I mean, the first thing I worked on for Triumph, which was really, really awesome, was the election special and then the election series on Hulu during 2016. So I was very, very happy that I had a good major outlet to write about the election, because this was right after SNL, which I did a lot of writing in relation to the primary. You know, I contributed a lot of jokes to like cold opens and stuff. But I didn't want to stop being able to talk about the election. So I was able to do that all the way through. In terms of things I was proud of, oh God, I think maybe the Hulu episode where we got a focus group, and we got a real focus group that thought that they were actual people doing opinions on both Trump and Hillary sort of leaked footage. So we got both Trump and Hillary people to believe that they were watching leaked footage of the candidate they support saying things that were completely impossible to defend, and then watching them try to defend them, which was really like one that I wrote was Hillary calling Chelsea and telling her she's so excited about her daughter, that Chelsea was about to have a baby, and asking her that it would really help out the campaign if she could give birth about 5 weeks earlier than she's supposed to, because that's what the big Super Tuesday states are.
That's brilliant. That's
Or
very
there was
good.
another one, that, I mean, was so funny, that David Taylor wrote, I think was one of the writers, who said it was Hillary being woken up by a guy in the military to say that the Benghazi embassy is being attacked, and she's like, "It is 2 in the goddamn morning." Like, it was so funny. And then like for Trump, it was like him telling Larry King that he's getting DNA tests on Ivanka just to be 100% sure they're blood related.
That's so brilliant. That's very
Stuff
good.
like that. And just watching people defend things that like that there were people who really did believe that OJ had a phone conversation with Trump while in the white Bronco, where Trump asked him to kill his ex-wife too.
That's very good. If you had to look like at a favorite moment while working on SNL, what would that be?
I think the most happy I was at SNL was the Elizabeth Banks episode, because that was my favorite piece that I wrote with Pete there, which was about trans bathrooms, about the debate over not letting trans women use ladies' rooms. And it was such an easy one to write, because it was such a weird hypocrisy of saying, don't let these women use the bathroom, like it's this magical gift to be allowed to use a freaking public restroom.
Absolutely.
And it was the first time I wrote something that like that the room at SNL liked, and that, you know, sailed straight to air and did well. And that was a very happy moment. I also, for getting to see Larry David say a joke that I wrote as Bernie Sanders was a really cool moment.
That's awesome. And then I think just to kind of like wrap things up now, I want to know, can we expect a comedy special from you anytime soon?
What's funny you ask, I was going to film one in April. I had a Netflix special that was scheduled for
Oh,
the Netflix is a Joke Festival in April. I do not know when or if that will happen because it is not a good time for a comedy festival. It is a very, very bad time to get thousands of people together for a frivolous reason, like a corporate comedy festival. You know, if you're going to get people together, it has to be for a good cause. Uh, you know, to be honest, it's even though a lot of people are congregating right now, it's for a much less frivolous reason. So I think it's different to have a comedy festival. It would be irresponsible to get people sick for something like, you know, doing comedy shows. That just doesn't feel worth it yet. And I don't know what's going to happen when we, you know, because it's not like you can just do everything that was going to happen over the summer once we're allowed to again. So I don't know, hopefully, but yeah, I was going to be doing a short comedy special for Netflix.
what would the name be of it?
What's that?
What would the
Well, it was
name
going to be
be?
part of it. It was going to be part of a series, so it was going to be named specifically after. I don't think I was going to have a title. It was going to be me and Nico White, Derek Gaines, Jordan Rock, Carly Aquilino. It was a lot. It was a series of specials of people associated with the movie. Those are other actors and people who are associated with Pete and the movie. Like Derek Gaines plays Zoots in King of Staten Island. Um, Nico White was not in the movie, but he's in Big Time Adolescence for about a second. But he's a good friend of ours, you know, the great comic. So this was going to be a like its own series of specials, that like shorter specials that we were going to have.
Absolutely.
I think if I was going to have my own comedy special, I would. It's really hard for me to know what I would name it. Um, I would really want it to be like extra pretentious. I want it to be something that people really look at and say like, "Oh, really?" But I'm not prepared to, you know, make that decision yet.
Absolutely. Do you think that you would use the same material, or do you think that you're going to rewrite certain material?
I mean, I think that there's a certain you have to have. You kind of can't pretend that nothing's happened in the last several months. So yeah, I would imagine that there's a lot of things I probably would talk about that didn't exist before. Hopefully, you know, because it's really weird to just wait for all this to be over and then just go out and be like, so you guys Tindering again? That's back, right? Tinder's crazy.
Yeah, 100%. And then just as a New Yorker, just to wrap everything up, um, Joe's or John's Pizza?
Which was the first one? Joe's?
Joe's, yeah.
You mean the one in Bleecker? Is that
Yeah.
Joe's?
No, no,
Uh,
Joe's is the slices, John's is the one on Bleecker.
right. I don't think I've had John's. I mean, I've had Joe's plenty. I don't know if I've actually had. The answer is DeFara. The answer is DeFara's. DeFara, the pizza that's so good, it's always has a line and never has an A rating from the health board. That's how good DeFara's is. They keep getting shut down for mice, and people are lined up around the block when they reopen.
So
That's
it's
what pizza's all about.
so it's authentic. It's the real experience.
It's so look. It's an old building. It's hard to keep it clean, but it's look. It's coming out of a pizza oven. Obviously, how many bacteria could survive? The point is, the pizza is that good. It takes forever. There's no drink options. There's nowhere to sit. It's it's got no room to stand. It has a B from the health board at most. Yet everyone knows it's that good. That's what good pizza is.
But
And Joe's
Dave,
is fine.
thank you. Dave, thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it, especially in this like crazy time. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, and I really appreciate being here. And hope you enjoy the movie if you see it. And also, for the love of God, please support George Floyd and his family, if that is within your means. Please help support police reform, Citizen Zero. There's a lot of places you can donate.